Yeah, hello and welcome. The use of JavaScript. First of all, we're going to be at functions in JavaScript. So, how do you create a function in JavaScript? How do you create a function in JavaScript? Okay, functions in JavaScript. The number one way would be by using the function keyword, and the second way would be by using arrow functions. Arrow functions are more modern, and that is the way to go. So, but we'll start by the way of doing it. So, function, or say function, then the name of the function you want to create. So, I'm going to create a function and I'm going to call it add num. So, I'm naming it add num because we want to be able to use this function to add numbers together. Okay, that's what we call it add num. Okay, it's always good that whenever you're naming your function, give it a name that relates to what it does. That's the right way to do it. So name it add num. That is the right way to do it. Okay. So yeah, welcome Stephen. Welcome Maladi Akinwumi. Sorry we are starting late today because I had some issues with my power supply, so I had to fix it up. And I decided we do it 8 o'clock so that we don't have interruptions. Please let me know that if you can see my Visual Studio Code. Stephen Akinwumi. Can you see my Visual Studio Code? Can you see the VS Code? You can just talk or you can put SMS. Either talk or SMS. Anyone that is okay with it. Please, you guys should let me know that you can see my VS Code. Am I sharing it well? Can you see my VS Code? Yes, we can. Okay, so you can see my VS Code. So today we're going to be looking at two important aspects in order for us to cover the basics of JavaScript. Number one, we're going to be looking at functions. Functions are very, very important because they contain the code block of what you want your code to be done. And we're going to be looking at DOM manipulation. We're going to be able to use DOM to manipulate the HTML that we did last time. So we're going to see actual application of JavaScript making our website interactive. So I said today we're going to be learning about functions, and we all know that JavaScript is an object-oriented programming language. So we can use it as OOP. And object-oriented programming simply means that you're looking at a program as being an object, and an object is anything that has properties and functions, anything that has attributes and functions. So the attributes are when you declare things like age. Age is an attribute. Age, let age equal to 25. That's an attribute of a person. Let the person's height, let height equal to 6.5 meters. That's the attribute of a person. But when you declare something like reading, reading is an action. So it's a function, it's a method. Looking is an action. It's a function, it's a method. So how do you create such functions? That's what we're going to be learning to do. So there are two ways you can use in creating function. Number one is by using the function keyword and then the function name, doing it the normal way. Then number two way is by using arrow functions. Arrow functions is the modern way to go, but we're going to learn the two ways of creating functions so that we know how to do it. So when you say function, that's how you make this know that you want to create a function. Then you put the name of the function, add num. You can see the way I put the name, add num. I'm using camel case, so the first word is in small letter, but the first letter of the second word is in capital letter. And I said, whenever you want to name your function, make sure you put a name that relates to what the function does. So this function is going to be used to add numbers. That's why we say function add num. If this is going to be teaching or reading, we would have said function teaching, function reading. So reading is the name of the function, teaching is the name of the function, add num is the name. But this function is what you write in order for the interpreter to know that you want to start creating a function. Okay, so you say function add num. That's the first thing you do. Now you start writing the function. So the next thing you're going to do is to put a bracket and indicate the argument. Arguments means things that you use when when declaring the function or when calling the function. So the arguments we're going to be using is num1, which is the first number that we're going to be adding, and num2, which is the second number that we're going to be adding. So that those are the things you put in the bracket. Then the next thing is for you to now open your curly bracket and now write in what you want the function to do. So what do I want this function to do? I want this function to simply return the sum of num1 and num2. Okay, that's what I want it to do. So I can write that and I can now come to the second line and simply say return sum. Okay, I can actually say return num1 plus num2 without writing it line by line like this. But this is how I want to lay it out. Okay. So now, once you call this function, you finish writing the function. If you want to call the function, what you simply do is you simply say the name of the function, which is add num. Then you call it with parameters. So parameters is something that's going to replace this argument that you passed. So for num1, you want it to be 2, whereas for num2, you want it to be 4. So in that case, you want to run this add num function on these two numbers. So you can see this is for num1. What you have here is the argument. What you have here is the parameters. So the parameters go and fill in for the argument. So what is going to be done now that in place of num1 and num2, it's going to have 2 and 4, and it's going to sum them up and return the sum, which is 6. Okay. If you want to see this when you run it, you have to enclose it into console.log. So make sure you put it inside console.log if you want to be able to see it. So I'm going to close it in console.log. So I'm going to save by doing Ctrl S. Then I'm going to come down here and run it by simply saying node main.js. We all know how we run this code. Simply say node main.js. Okay. So we're going to wait for it to run so that we'll see the output of that add. Okay. You can see the output here is 6 because 2 plus 4 is 6. So I'm going to allow us to ask questions now so that make sure that we understand it before we start writing other functions. So this is where we have the function declaration, and this is where we have the call, function call. Function call simply means calling the name of the function and now giving it parameters that will replace the argument and do the actual calculation. So this is the function call. This is your function. You just write your function, nothing will happen. It sees it, but it's not happening anything. Nothing is happening until you call it. So this line calls the function add. Okay. So I'm going to allow you guys to ask questions before we continue. So Stephen, Victoria, Baruwa, Akinwumi, uh, can we ask questions so that I'll know whether you guys understood what I've done so far before we can continue. So for those of us that are just joining, we started late because I was having some power issues. I have to fix my power before I started. So I'm sorry for starting late today. From next class, we're going to resume starting on time. Thank you. So let me get some questions. So we can easily change this to 8 and change this one to 10. So it's going to do 8 plus 10 and give us 18. So if I run this and I go back here and make the function call, you can see 18. So this code, we can easily use it for multiplication and any other. So I can simply copy this code and I come down here, Control V, and instead of saying add num, I can call this minus num. Okay, so here now I'm gonna have the subtraction sign, whereas here I'm gonna have, instead of sum, we're gonna be having difference. Okay, difference. So what I'm gonna be returning here is what? Difference. Difference. Okay, yeah. So I can now call this function. I pick this up here and still use this to call the function. So what am I calling now? Instead of add num, I'm calling minus num. So I'm minusing, but you have to arrange it well. So let me minus 20 and say uh, 13. 20 minus 13 is 7. So if I save this now and I come down here and run it again, so you can see 7. So the addition for add num gave us 8 plus 10, which is 18. For this one, 20 minus 13, which is 7. Okay. So that is how you declare your function. Use the function keyword, then the name of the function, then the argument you want to pass in later when you want to make the function call. Then you write what you want your function to do. You simply want your function to return difference, where difference is simply equal to num1 minus num2. Okay, so that is the normal way. But I'm going to also teach you guys how to use what we call arrow function, which is it's a better way of writing this. It's shorter and it looks fine. So once you want to use an arrow function, you have to declare your function. You can use the const keyword. Then the next thing, you put the name. So we've done add num, we've done minus num. Let's look at times num for multiplication, multiply num. Okay, I don't know how to call it. So let me just call it times num. So we're creating another function known as times num. You know, you can also use this method to create it, but I want to show you another method. So you're going to say equal to, then in your bracket you bring in your argument, okay, which we said num1 and what, num2. Okay, so those are the arguments. You can see that everything is going to be in the same line for this arrow function. That's why it is the best way to write your function. That is how everybody is writing function. So it's equal to, now is when you now put in your curly bracket. I'm going to receive somebody that wants to join. Sorry, please. Okay, so let's continue. So now you put the curly bracket and you now write what you want to the function to do. So I'm going to simply say return. What do I want to do? I just want to say num1 times, this is the sign you use for times, num2. Okay, so that is how you write using arrow function. You can see everything is in one line. Now if you do a function call for this, you're going to see that it will still give the same effect as if when you wrote it the right way. So I'm gonna now call, I'm making function call for times num. So what numbers am I timesing? Let me just do 2 times 3, which we all know is 6. So that we'll see whether 6 is coming down there. So if I save this now and I come down here and I run it, we're gonna see the output. Remember, we already have 8 and 17. Okay, you can see now 8, 17, and 12, because we have 2 times 6, which is 12. Okay, so this is another way of writing this whole line that we had up to 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. You can write it in one straight line. Okay, so let's say I'm giving you assignment to write me the add num in a straight line. How do you do add num? You simply copy this the way it is here now. You put it down here and you now call it add num. Let me show you that it will give the same effect. Add num. Okay, now add num is returning plus and not times, so this is plus here. Now if I come here now and I comment out this code, let me comment out this code. You know how to do multi-line comments. I hope we all know multi-line commenting. So I'm going to use multi-line commenting to comment out this code. Okay, so that means that the interpreter is no longer seeing this add num here. It's seeing only this one here. But I want to show you that it does the same thing. So let's say now we'll come here and say add num. We are now calling add num instead of times num. So I'm calling add num on 2 and 6. So it's going to simply say 2 plus 6, which is 8. So let me save this and see whether it's going to give me 8 here now. Okay, it's telling me there's an error somewhere. Check it out. So once you have an error, you should always scroll up to see where your error is coming from. Okay, it says add num reference cannot access add num before initializing. Okay, const add num. Why should that be const add num1 num2 return num1 plus num2 add. There shouldn't be any error. Oh, sorry, I'm having add num here. This should be here so that it takes them out all. Okay, if I save again, then I can come back and rerun it again. Okay, you can see the answer is 8 because 6 plus 2 plus 6 is 8. Okay, so you can always write your function in this way. This is the typical way of writing it before, but ex6 syntax requires you to write it in arrow function way because it's shorter. So in using arrow function, you have to declare the function as a variable, just the way you normally use const let. You can also put let here or var to still work. Then in the first bracket you put the argument, then in the curly bracket you put what you really want the function to do. Okay, so I'm gonna allow you guys to ask me question on this function before we move into DOM manipulation. That's the next thing we're gonna look at. So let's look at DOM manipulation. Okay, so DOM manipulation is very, very important because that is how we're going to start now affecting our index.html. Okay, so before I do that, does anybody have any question? No? I hope I pronounced it well. Akim, Victoria, Stephen, Barua, any questions before we continue? Okay, you can write on the message so that I can read it, or you can unmute yourself and talk. Yes, yes. Let's have response so that I'll make sure you guys can hear me before I continue. Yes, we can. That's 100%. Okay, yes. Are we clear on this, please? I hope you can still hear me. Please, if you can hear me, let me know.
Your screen is not showing.
My screen is not showing.
Yes.
So, what are you seeing from there? Please let me know.
Just a blank
Just a blank.
page. Yeah, it's showing now.
It's showing now.
Mm.
What of now? Is it showing?
No.
But was it showing?
Yes.
Was it showing when I was teaching?
Yeah.
Okay. So, is it this one? Is it clear? The concept that I tried to pass.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is a function. Function is simply, let's say, arithmetic that you want to happen. So, whenever you want to create it, you have to say this keyword function. Then you put the name. The name has to relate to what the function is doing. So this one is doing addition. Now, when you want to add, you need to add numbers. So that which you want to use in doing the addition, you have to declare it inside this first bracket. So you have num1 and num2 because those are the things you want to add. Now you open another bracket, a curly bracket. Then you now write what the function is supposed to do. So this function is supposed to find the sum of number 1 and number 2. So once it finds it, it has to return it. So it will now return the value of the sum it has found. Okay. So here now what you do here is to call this very function and attribute it with some values known as parameters. So these values are values that you now pass in to now replace this num1 and num2. So that is what happens. So this is for addition. You can also do it for subtraction. You can see the difference between this code block here and this one. Just simply that instead of having add num, you now have minus num because you want to do subtraction. That's why you gave it a name that relates to subtraction. But you have to still pass the numbers you want to subtract. So in subtraction, what are you getting? You're getting the difference of num1 and num2. Then you return that difference. In that same way, if you want to do multiplication or any other. Then I then say that this function that we wrote in 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, you can actually write it in one single line using a methodology or using a way in the recent JavaScript uh, implementations known as arrow function. So this is what we call the arrow here. You can see this arrow. That's where we got this name, arrow function. So you have to write everything in one line. So instead of saying function minus num, you can say const, then you put the name of the function. Say equal to, then in normal bracket you put the argument, then you put your arrow function, put the curly bracket, and put what you want to be done. So you want this function times num to simply return the multiplication of num1 and num2. Okay. So you can see now I came here and rewrote this add num again. Then I now made the function call. Okay. So, Vicky, is it better now? Vicky, are you there? Still there?
Yes.
Okay. So this is that's how it is done. The more you study the code, the more you get to understand it. The more you study it, the more you get to understand it. So that is the essence of uh, functions. Okay. I think we started this class late, and some people are, you guys are You're weak. Some of you are sleeping. Vicky, are you sleeping? Your voice is sounding as if you're
No.
sleeping. I wanted us to do DOM manipulation, but DOM manipulation is going to be a good concept, and I don't want to do it when everybody is not very active. So maybe I have to suspend it and quickly do finish up OOP. So let me, before DOM manipulation, let me do object-oriented programming, which I already introduced. Object-oriented, object-oriented uh, programming in JavaScript. Okay, so let's look at OOP JavaScript. So whenever you're going for programming interviews, they're going to ask you about OOP. What do you understand by OOP? What do you understand by OOP? So in OOP, you simply see every object, you see every object as having two major things known as properties, properties and functions. Okay, so properties are just the variable, normal the way you declare variables, which you already know. Functions is what I just taught you now. They are all functions. Okay, so properties and functions. In some other programming languages, instead of calling them properties and functions, we call them attributes, attributes and methods. So if you hear attributes and methods instead of properties and functions, know that we are still talking about object-oriented programming. Okay. Now in object-oriented programming, you create what we call class. You create a class. So everything you're doing, you bundle them classes, into classes. Okay. So let's create a given class now. Call say class. Please make sure it's in small letter. So let's create an object, a class for an object known as person. So that's the first class we are creating. Now, anytime you're naming your class, make sure you start it with a capital letter. So this is how you name your class. So this is object-oriented programming. Then you put a curly braces. Then inside your curly braces, you're going to have the properties and the functions of this class person. So properties and functions of this class person. That's what we have inside it. Now, how do I write the properties? I want to first of all write the properties, then I write the functions. Now, in writing the properties, you can use what we call constructor. So I'll simply say constructor. Don't worry if you don't understand. When I'm done writing, I'm gonna explain. So, what are the properties that a person can have? Say me, Augustine, what are my properties? I say properties are those features, those attributes that you can see on me. Whereas functions are the things I perform. My properties are things like my age, my name, my height, my complexion. All those are properties. What you can look at me and be able to say about me. Whereas my functions are the actual actions I'm performing. Like what I'm doing now is that I'm teaching. That is my function. So the properties you're going to write inside the constructor. So let's say the properties I'm going to be having now. Say my first name. That is my property number one. So you can declare as many properties as possible. So I also have my last name. That is my property. Then I can also have my age. That is my property. And I can also have my date of birth. DOB. that is also my property. So all these, you're gonna declare them in the constructor. Is actually a method or a function that you use in initializing your properties. Okay. Then inside the constructor, you can now say this dot name. Okay, we actually use first name. So we say this dot first name, and we're going to assign it a value of first name. So that is the number one. And the other one we have there is last name. So I'm going to say this dot last name. I'm going to assign it the value of last name. Okay. The next one is age. So I'm going to say this dot age. So you see the way we use the keyword. This keyword, that's what you use for initializing the variable values for the constructor. This dot age. So we're going to assign it the value of age. Finally, the last property here is date of birth. This dot date of birth. I'm going to assign it the value of date of birth. Okay. So those are the properties. Very, very important. Those are the properties. So after declaring the properties, the next thing you're going to now declare is the functions. The functions, okay? So I can have a function, say, get full name. That can be my function. So I can give it a name, get full name, okay? So this function, the job is to get my full name. And you know that my full name is a combination of my first name and my last name. That is my full name, okay? So a function is always using the properties to work. So this function get full name is going to use the property of first name, like we declared here, and last name here, in order to get out my full name. So that's why we say that an object is anything that has properties and functions. Like now, one of my properties is my mouth. Now, if I want to perform the function of speaking, I have to use my mouth to speak. So I'm using my property to perform the function of speaking. Just the same way this get full name is going to use the property of first name and last name in order to get out your full name. So this get full name, what is it going to be doing? It is simply going to be returning. You're already used to this word return my name. So how can I do that? I can use the template literal to return the name, and I can simply say in curly brackets, please dot first name, because I already have it there. Okay, so that's the first string I'm returning. So I can also return the other string because they are coming together. And what is that string? That string is simply this dot last name. Okay, so that is what this function does. But you mustn't have just only one function in the class. So just like you had how many properties here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. You can have as many functions as possible. So let's try creating another function apart from getting full name. Let's create another function, say get birth year. So a function that can return my birth year in full. Okay. So I'm gonna simply say get birth year. You can see the way I'm writing the name of the function. So you have to be careful. We are using camel casing the first word is always in small letter, the first letter of the second one in capital letter, the first letter of the third word in capital letter. Okay. Then we put the bracket where you're supposed to put the argument, but you know you already declared that in the constructor. Then inside here is where you now write in what you want this to do. So I simply want this to just return this dot date of birth. You know we already have that dot get full year. So there's a function known as get full year. So it's a date object. It's from the date object. So we're going to use it to return this. But please, if you're going to be using this function, this is going to be a new date object. So I'm going to simply say new date object. Okay, and that's going to take in. So if I now, this is what we call a class. A class is simply a blueprint showing you what the object has to contain. Now, just like you have your normal function, if you had written a function, if you now come down, you're going to make the function call. When you create your class, which is the blueprint of the object, in order to make it actually work or do something, you have to now create an object that uses that class that implements the class. Okay, so let me create such an object. Let me say const uh, student student one. So I want to create a student that is going to be built from the person class. So let's create a student that is going to build from the person class. So I'm going to say new person because we are building from the person class. Okay, so new person. Then in brackets, I'm going to assign all the arguments. I'm going to assign them real values. Okay, so let's say the person I'm creating now, I'm going to call that person Victoria. Okay, so Victoria is the person's first name, and I'm gonna give it the second name, the last name. The last name I'm gonna say is Inyang. You know, we're creating an object from the blueprint now, and I'm gonna assign it a date of birth, and the date of birth I'm gonna be assigning it say 8 9 1982. Okay, so I've created this person now. So if I now come and say console.log in order for me to see this come out, console.log and in bracket, I'm going to simply say student1 dot. I can call any of these functions. So I can, let me say dot get full name. Let me call that one get full name. Okay. So let me use it and call get full name. So make sure when you make a function call, make sure you put the extra bracket. If I save this down and I come down here and run this, okay, so reach error. Let's check out what the error says. Okay, last name is the last name. So what last name is not defined. Okay. So let's check last name. This has to be small letter L. It's case sensitive, so make sure you always write one. Control X to save again. I'm gonna come down here again and run this again. Okay, you can see Victoria Enya. So we're able to create this object from the class person. So the object now is Victoria. So you can see we gave it Victoria, which is the first name. Inyang, which is the last name, date of birth. Okay, so let me give it age before the date of birth. So if I say 32 as the age, okay, so those are what I have. So you can see all the properties are already assigned. So let me say if I want to control C, if I want to run this again, but instead of getting the full name, I want to use the other function known as get birth year, get birth year. You can see it already there. So let me try to get the birth year of Victoria. You can see that the birth year is this. So let's see how it's gonna format it now, make it return 01. Okay, you can see 1982. That is the birth year. So it's picking out only the year here, 82. You can see it. So if I give this now 1986, if I save again, go run it again, it's gonna give me 86. Okay. Every has properties. These are the properties. You can call them attributes, and they also have functions. These are the functions. So the attributes are always initialized in a method known as constructor. And this is how it is done. This is just the syntax, and you have to just learn how to. You just have to learn how to use it because that's how it's gonna always come out. So this is the blueprint. So it is with this blueprint that you can create as many people as possible. So let me say now I create another student. This is the this is an object now. You're creating an object from the class. So this next person, let me call this next person that okay. Let me check out your name very well. Yeah, I think the first name is Ibu Kun Oluwa. Okay, Kun Oluwa that okay, age I can put 27, and here I'm gonna put 1995. So here let me put 10, and here let me put 2. Okay. So when you now get for person 2, so let's get all these same things for person 2. And you know that person 2 is Daudi Ibukun Oluwa. Okay. So if I save this now and I count down here, instead of having Victoria Inyanga 1986, we're going to be having details from the other person. Okay. Student 2, sorry. It's not student 1, it should be student 2. Okay, so you can see Ibukun Oluwadawu 1995. So you see it's getting details. So you can use this blueprint now. Once you've created the first blueprint, which is the class, you can create as many objects as possible. Okay. So and once you're creating, you're assigning them the same properties and the same function that is already in this class. So let me say now, instead of calling this student 1 and student 2, you can actually call this object the name. Say for this one is going to be Victoria, Victoria, and for this student 2 is going to be Ibukun. Okay, so they are actually created from this class person. That's why we call it new person. You're creating them from class person. So instead of saying student 2, student 1, here you can actually use the name of the person, the actual person, which is the object. It will still give you what you should have. So if I come here and put Victoria, if I run this again, and I come down here, and if I save and come down here and run, you can see we are still having Victoria here on 19th because we are talking about Victoria. So now if I decide to talk about another person, I can simply get, so let me get the details of another person. Just immediately after Victoria, I want to get the details of Ibukun. So please, I'm shortening your name to Ibukun so that it becomes easier for me to write and also pronounce. I don't want to be murdering your name. If I save this again and I come down here and run it, so you can see I have details for Victoria Nyang and Ibukun. So this is how you're going to find out that as we proceed, this is actually how you're going to be modeling your codes. This is what we call object-oriented programming. Everything you create, you make it look like an object, and an object is anything that has properties. These are the properties, and functions. These are the functions. You can see the difference between properties and functions. Properties, as you're declaring them like a variable, make sure you start with the word the keyword these, especially when they are inside the constructor. Then you now have um, your functions or your methods. Okay, so that is the concept of, sorry for the noise, that's the concept of object oriented. So for object oriented programming, when you're looking at this for the first time, it's gonna like be very confusing to you, but until you read it again, you study the video, watch the video again, study it again, then after some time you're gonna start making sense of it. Okay. So I'm gonna allow us to ask questions. Velari Uhuru, what happened, Velari? I thought you were gonna start this class with us. Unmute yourself and talk. Let me hear you, Velari. Velari, unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm
What
sorry
happened?
for being late. It's so late here in Kenya, and you just slipped my mind.
You went sleeping. Did you go sleeping?
And I was just stressing.
Okay, okay. So let me recap what I've done so far. Wanted to do DOM manipulation today, but I wanted the class to be full. You know, we started late. That's why I wanted to concentrate today just on functions and classes and objects, so that next class we'll do DOM manipulation. When we start doing DOM manipulation, that's when you guys will start having fun. What we've been doing so far is kind of boring because it's the basics of JavaScript, but I thank God that we're able to go through them now, and we are done. So, DOM manipulation, that's when we start creating our main website, and we're going to start seeing how it looks. But please, what we've done so far, you can see the whole code. I'm going to paste it on the WhatsApp group so that if you missed anything, just get to know it. This is uh, basics of JavaScript. We started with comment. We say that comment is anything that comes before this double forward slash for single commenting, and this forward slash with asterisk for multi-line commenting. Then went on to look at variables. We said we have different data types, and the different data types we have are strings, number, boolean, null, undefined, array, and the variables can be declared using this keyword var, let, or const. If your variable, the value is going to be changing, use let. If it's never going to be changing, use const. Then var used to be the way to declare in olden times, but currently we use let and const. So these are the data types, and what determines the data type is actually the value. If the value is a collection of letters enclosed in single or double quotes, call it a string. So this is a typical example of a string data type. If it's just a number, say 27 or 35, we'll call it number data type. If it is something that is going to have the value of true or false, let's say you're asking whether somebody is married or not, there's going to be boolean. then this is a null. Once you declare a variable and set it to be equal to null, then it's of data type null. Then if you declare and give it undefined, it's of data type undefined, or you declare and you did not give it a value at all, then it is also undefined. Now, when you declare a variable and you give it a collection of strings, not just one value, but more than one, we call it an array. So this is an array of strings, whereas this is an array of numbers. So that is what we did the first time. Then went on to check the data types using the type of, if you say type of name, to tell you what data type is name and which is string. Then we went on to learn about string operations, where we talked about concatenation and length. We got the string length, which is just the number of elements in the string. We looked at converting it to uppercase, lowercase, and getting a substring from a string. So please check out the videos. Then we looked at concatenation, and we said that concatenation simply means joining two or more strings together using the plus sign. The plus sign is the concatenation operator. You can also join by using what we call template literals. In that case, we don't use the plus signs. We just use this dollar sign, and in brackets we put the variables. Okay, this is another way of concatenating. Then we went on to look at arrays. This is an example of arrays of numbers and arrays of colors. And we looked at array operations that can be done to arrays. So just like assigning them a new value to continue the values, or assigning a new element into the array, you can use this way to do it. You can also use push. You can also, if you're doing push, you're adding from this side. But if you want to add from this other side, you use on shift. Then to take out, you use pop. You're taking out the last one. But if you want to take out from this side, you use shift. So those are the operations that can happen on an array. Now we can also check whether something is an array by using the keyword array. Then we put the name of that thing we want to check. If we run it on age, we know age is not an array, so it will yield false. But if we run it on color, because we declared colors as an array here, const colors, this is going to show true. Now we went on to learn about the math method and math properties, math operators. We said if you want to do any of these mathematical operators, simply use the keyword math, but make sure it starts with capital letter dot, the operation you want to happen. Then we looked at the different operators, like the assignment operator, which is equal to, the addition operator, which is plus, the multiplication operator, which is the asterisk. Then exponential, when you want to raise to a power, you use the double asterisk. Then division operator, which is the forward slash, and increment operator if you want to add by one, decrement if you want to decrease by one. And modulus simply means the remainder when you do a division. So that is that. So those were the things we looked at under math operations. Then we went on to learn about object literals, how to create a simple object. And your object can contain, if you're declaring this variable normally, this would have been equal to, but once it's inside an object, you use the colon. So this is name, height, subject. Subject is an array inside an object, so you declare it that way. You can also have another object inside an object. So those are the things we looked at, and we looked at how to transverse the object and get some values from them. Then we looked at arrays of objects, and I told you that arrays of objects are very, very important, because when you're creating your database, that is how your databases are mapped out. So the records in your database are actually arrays of objects. So this is record 1, this is record 2, this is record 3. So we also looked at how we can get out the values of the different elements in the object. Now we said we can convert an array of objects into a JSON, which is the normal format for data transfer online. So we can do that using the keyword JSON.stringify, then you put the arrays of object name. Here we have task. put tags here because the arrays of objects we created here is task. So it could be anything. So we went on to look at iteration using loops. We looked at the for loop and the while loop, and we looked at advanced form of for using the for off. Then we went on to look at conditionals, where we looked at the if else statement and the switch. That was the last thing we looked at. And before today, we are looking at functions. It's very, very important. Say that functions is just the collection of the code block that you want to do. You're just simply assigning them names so that you can always call it at any time you want to perform such an operation. So if you want to add two numbers again, you don't need to write this function again. Simply make the function call by simply saying add num, and you assign it to value. So you can, when you look at this add num, you can see that it's almost the same thing as add num is almost the same thing as this smart operator that we have here. Why? Because all these smart operators are also functions that have been written by somebody, but they are inbuilt functions. They are already inside the JavaScript. JavaScript can easily call it and assign something. So if you see this smart power now, if you just add 8 and 2, it will just simply go and give you the square of 8, which is 8 squared. Okay, so you've assigned it these parameters, so it's going to run this, make this function call and give you the answer. So in that same way, that is what we've done here. We've written our own function and we'll call it add num. So this is one way of writing the function. So you can simply replicate this add num into minus num. Just change, make sure you change here to minus. You can even call it times num or divide num. Create any function you want. But make sure the name of the function is always very similar to what the function is doing. So you have to use the function keyword, put the name of the function minus num, then put the parameter, the arguments that you're going to be using for the calculation. Then run the calculation and return the result. So you can do this in this way or do it using arrow function, which is the ES6 way, ES syntax and ES6 way of doing writing your function. So these that you've written here, this add num that you've written here, you can see this add num. You can see how many lines of code, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can write it in one line by simply saying const add num. So add num is still the same name here, but these arguments you're going to pass them into the first bracket, then you use your arrow function and do the return in the next one. So there's no need using sum again, you're just returning num1 plus num2. So you can see this is more concise and it's in a straight line. So it's a better way of doing this. So you can still make the function call. So that is function. So you can write function for anything, and I'm going to be giving you guys an assignment to write a function that does divide num. Divide num, that's the name of the function. Divide num. Please do this assignment. I'll submit it on the Slack. You can do it this night before you sleep. Let me know you can do it. You can just simply copy this one exactly the way it is from here to here. So just copy this. In place of minus num, change this to divide num. Then instead of difference, you're going to have quotient. So this should be quotient. Then instead of this sign, you're going to have the normal division sign, which is this one. Okay, so let me use it and know people that have grabbed this. So quickly do that. And like I said, for the object-oriented programming, you create a class, person assigning the properties and then the function. Then you can now create objects that will now use those properties and functions to create a real human being, a real person. And in this case, this person blueprint, we are using it to create Victoria and Ibuku, so that once we run it, we can get the actual value. So you can see the data for Victoria and Ibuku attributed here. So our next class is going to be DOM manipulation, which is going to involve our website. So that is our project. So next week, we are creating our website. We are doing our normal project. So we're going to be using the knowledge of our HTML that we did, CSS, and the JavaScript that we're going to be learning by Monday, which is DOM manipulation, to design our website and see whether we can post it before we start learning React. And like I said, the React we are going to be learning, we're going to be from the knowledge that we've gotten from what we've done so far. So I'm going to leave you guys to ask me questions before I sign off. But before that, I want to say that if we want, do you guys want us to have a class before Monday, like tomorrow? Since tomorrow is Saturday, can we have a class in the morning and do the manipulation so that by next week we know we are concentrating on building projects so that we can learn a whole lot? I want to know who is ready for tomorrow morning class.
Not ready yet for tomorrow.
Can we do it tomorrow morning? You can unmute yourself and talk. Anybody that wants to talk. Can we do the manipulation
Tomorrow morning is fine.
Okay. Abdul Salam Baruwa says tomorrow morning is fine. Velari Uguru, what do you think about tomorrow morning? If we do tomorrow morning, we're going to learn how to push this code to GitHub. I hope everybody have created you guys have created your GitHub account, because I want to push all this code to GitHub so that you can go there and get the code. You can have it for yourself, use it and learn. You can see this is a very descriptive class from the starting to the end. So use it and study so that you can also have these files, the form, the contact us, index.html, all that we've created so far. So that when we start building projects by next week, you can be able to follow up. So do we do tomorrow morning? I want to have a consensus so that I know that everybody is joining. Who else is ready for tomorrow morning apart from Abdul Salam? Who else? Or should I put the question on the Slack and okay, I'll put the question again on the Slack and on WhatsApp group. Valari, you're not on the WhatsApp group yet, Abby? Valari? Okay, Valari, I think she's not even online. So we are gonna stop here. So I'm gonna share the video for this class. So please play it over and over. Get used to it. By the next class, if you have any concerns, you can ask me a question on it, and I'll do well to take care of it. Okay, thank you. See you when I see you. God bless you.
Thank you.